Hello and welcome back to what will be the last in our series of election specials. So, of course, we're giving it the title, The Final Countdown. Hope you've enjoyed being on the campaign trail with us. This episode, we're going to have a look at some views from people we met at Bannockburn, and we also have an interview with Bill Bonnar, who is one of the candidates in Rutherglen. But before we get into that, let's just have a look and see what have we noticed from the papers recently, Marlene?
Shall I put up one? Both Daily Record front pages. The right-hand one came out just yesterday, I think it was, maybe the day before. And it's saying, Daily Record saying, we're asking our readers to vote Labour. Because Labour always keeps their promises, don't they, Fiona?
The Daily Record also said it's the first time they've ever backed Labour, which anybody who's read the Daily Record ever knows that they've supported Labour for decades. So how they thought that we would fall for that one, I don't know. But just in case anybody needs any reminding, remember the vow, the one that scuppered 2014.
So there's David, Ed and Nick, they're all goodies, and they said, yep, we're vowing to whatever it was. They didn't keep the vow. And then I do think it's funny because although David Cameron is there as a goodie on the vow side, he's there as a baddie on the right-hand side. You know, he's there as an evil.
And we're not disagreeing with the graphic they've got on there.
If anyone's watching who's thinking, oh, is that true? Do Labour not keep their promises? Well, here's another one. The UK will be a federal state within 2 years. Holyrood and the other regions of the UK will be handed the equal status to Westminster. That's a promise we will keep. Gordon Brown.
Yeah.
2014, nearly 10 years ago, folks.
Yeah. So thank you very much to the viewer who got in touch with us after last week's programme and said that they liked the show, which is lovely. Thank you very much. We also always love to get some feedback from our viewers, but also had some information for us about the GB Energy logo. Now, if you recall, we did show you, this is what it looks like. No expense spared. It looks red, white and blue, but the farting light bulb is the way it's been described.
Ashraf, it's Great British, GB, Great British Energy, and it's one of their flagship policies. So obviously they've put a lot of effort into it. I mean, I don't think you're being very fair to them, really, Fiona. Well, that's what I did think. Well, I didn't really think that, but I thought, well, they probably have properly got someone to design it. My comment was, I hope they didn't pay them too much money. So it turns out that they may well have got that logo for the princely sum of about 57 pence, because look at this. You can go in and you can have a look at their designs and you're looking for a logo and you can put your company name on it and download it. And if we switch from the one to the other, you can see they've flipped the image.
And that doesn't make any sense, does it? Because if you look at that one, it's green, so that tells you a message, not in GB Energy's version. And also it's kind of forward-looking, and it's less like a farting light bulb. It's more like a shining bulb.
Well,
whereas in theirs,
I think this is called, the Labour Party may be unaware of this, but it's called subliminal messaging. Now, if they'd kept it green, that would be a statement saying it was really going to be about sustainability and green energy, and that was the biggest, most important things in their heart when they were putting together this policy. But actually, it's red, white, and blue, so you can tell that really the biggest thing in their heart or their head was just Great Britain and how much cash is going to get siphoned off Scotland and down to London.
Clearly, the thought also was 57p. That'll do. It's only Scotland.
That'll do. oh God. Where should we go next then? Having had a laugh.
Right. Well, we have had to laugh. That was a bit of the intro. But we were at Bannockburn last weekend. So we took the opportunity just to ask random selection of people that we found there how they were feeling about the election, and lots of different views. So we're just going to play a selection of those views.
It's Labour, it's just going to be Tories, so I don't see why you would vote for them. I mean, as folks say in the street, I'll vote for Labour, and I would say to them, well, can you tell me which policy it is that makes you want to vote for Labour?
Good question.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Good question.
And what do they say?
Some of them, without thinking, will say, we just want rid of the Tories, right? Others will think a little bit about it, and actually they are struggling because there isn't any policy, you know. So, no, I haven't had a decent answer yet.
So how are you feeling about this election?
It's a joke.
You reckon? Why do you say
Should
that?
be a de facto referendum. De facto.
Do you think with first past the post, can that work?
But what would that...
The SNP are not going to get us independence as long as I draw breath, because they're broken. Scotland were taken out of the EU by Westminster against their will. The Scots are sovereign people. We don't answer to anybody. We answer to ourselves. We put.
Absolutely.
We want to.
Yeah.
We can put a monarchy into throne in Scotland.
I completely get it that Scots are sovereign, we answer to ourselves, but we're not clear enough about what we want, I don't think. Not yet.
Because the SNP have had no drive.
Well, but you can't argue on the one hand it's the SNP, on the other hand it's up to us.
Scotland really needs to wake up to these unionist politicians. They don't serve Scotland, they serve their masters in Westminster.
That was the other thing about the debates. I watched a Labour politician in one of the debates the other night. They refused to state that they were a unionist party because they're frightened to admit it because of the amount of members of their party who are pro-independence. I mean, everybody tends to forget about Alex Bell and the Labour for Yes movement. In fact, one of the boys was showing a picture of the live stream with Anna Sarwar stoning with Alex Bell with the Labour for Independence banner. Aye.
They all end up twisting and turning and working out which lie to tell next. They can't tell the truth, David. That's the problem with it all.
I think this election will probably show that SNP haven't got quite the same support as they used to have.
Yeah, I think that's going to be clear.
And it's not because people don't want independence, it's because when a political party has told you for 10 years, vote for us, give us a mandate, and we'll get independence for you. And it happened over and over and over again. And people are saying, but you've got to get on the SNP. It's only SNP bus is the only bus going. I think it's
not true now. It's not true now, is it? Although with the first past the post voting system, they're the only ones who are going to get seats. That's true. But look, okay, so I understand that.
But the bus is going round in a circle.
Okay, that's quite a good image.
The bus is going round in a circle. It's been going round in a circle for 10 years. I've been on it for 8. And then I came off it and I said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. It's a waste of time. I'm still, obviously, we're from the Highlands. We're down. We do them in Indy marches wherever we can. Salvo, as you can see from my T-shirt, Salvo, I think, will be the way to go. Let's go back to October 23. October 23, the SNP party policy was that general election 24 was going to be run as a de facto, and on the ballot paper was going to have SNP for Scottish independence, as was voted by the Autumn Conference.
Yes, I know.
What's happened? What has happened in the last 8 months? All these people that were in support of SNP that were jumping up and down saying this is great 8 months ago, why are they still trying to defend a 180-degree turn of their party? Because it doesn't make sense.
The next bit was it will be the first thing on the manifesto, and it is the first thing on the manifesto.
Words are cheap. After 10 years, your words are cheap.
But be fair, Scots are sovereign, our words are cheap as well. That's what I'm trying to kind of understand.
We need to get the convention set up that the SNP have promised.
That was still...
that's where you can get the people asking the people, and that's where the international, we can bring in the international. Because we ain't going to get any freebie pass to leave by England because they can't afford to lose us.
I'm with you with that.
It's an investment company, so they're not going to actually put money in extracting any of the oil or anything like that, or protect it in Scottish waters. It's still going to go into the grid and all the rest of it. So it's just for investment, so people will invest in it to make money out of it.
Private sector investment.
My question
that money won't come back to Scotland.
No, exactly, because no one, who knows, because it's so
It's
unclear.
in the word GB.
If you were putting the money into it, then it would be good to have, if you're putting 25% into a new, initiative, then it would be good to own 25%.
That's exactly my question to Starmer would be that.
Labour
can you tell us what part of that the ordinary person is going to own?
Yeah.
And the answer is none.
But I think maybe it's good that Labour are getting in, because they are not going to do anything good for Scotland. So I think it'll help us. Yes. And I think that's what's keeping me going. By 2026, I think people will be scuddered. Fear, scuddered.
To me, you never know. You think like Brexit was one thing that would make people turn. And then you've got free ports coming up, and you've got this whole thing about energy, which we've got all this energy, and it's still how many? But one will actually break the camel's back, and it'll be like the Berlin Wall. It'll just go like that.
That's a good way to think. I hadn't thought about it like that. That's a really good way to think about it. We're not saying clearly enough that that's what we want, and why is that? And so we're having a wee bit of a chat about that.
That's a good one.
This is our latest one, and it was going like hotcakes in Argyle Street last week.
The only country in the world whose debt is decided by another country and then told it's too poor to be independent. Brilliant.
What are you feeling about this election that's coming up?
I don't think it's as bad as people make it out, the press make it out.
Yeah.
Labour's they might have landslides in the rest of the UK.
Yeah, they will.
But not Scotland.
Yeah.
Can you see?
You think the message is getting through a bit more in here, up here, just about?
Aye, I think.
Because they're not a very Labour Party now, are they?
No, they are. No, they're totally right wing. They're red Tories, as everybody says. But I think a lot of it's been fought in social media. And you see things turning in social media.
Yes, you do. Yeah, you do. And I mean, John Swinney's, he's very gentlemanly. He's kind of like calm, and he's got the facts.
Yes, absolutely.
And then Stephen Flynn is a bit more pokey, and so is Kate Forbes. I think Kate Forbes and Stephen Flynn have been doing a good job, kind of, balance up a bit John Swinney's gentleman-like approach.
Yes, I Stephen Flynn's the attack dog.
Attack dog. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's done a good job. I mean,
he certainly has.
Spontaneous rounds of applause in front of an English audience because he mentions Brexit. You think they need to be listening to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then, did you see the debate on? Well, it was the debate. It was Thursday there with Fiona.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Well, he got loads of applause there. English voters. He's the only one that did. Starmer got laughed at. Sunak got laughed at. But as soon as he brought up Brexit and the crowd applauded, Fiona Bruce stepped in. Oh,
she's trying to be the BBC's attack dog. But she doesn't do a very good job.
No, she doesn't. And I think people can start to see right through it.
Yeah, I know. Any effect she could have had, I think she's lost.
Yeah, it's obvious.
So, how are you feeling about this election then?
I think it's going great.
Yeah?
See, I come from Merseyside, 99% yes, and I'm talking to the ex-servicemen.
Wow, that's good, isn't it?
Yeah. Brilliant.
So you reckon that'll be transferring to SNP votes, or So that's good that you're feeling optimistic. I mean, I think its message is getting through now, especially about Labour.
It is getting through. It is.
Especially about
after 2 nights ago, in that debate, Labour and Tory, the audience tore them apart.
Yeah. That's
but that Fiona Bruce, she interrupted John Swinney 20 odd times, and now the other two got interrupted.
Yeah,
that is bad.
Yeah, it is bad, but I think people see it, and it's now not a tactic that's working very well.
It's not. As soon as John finished, he couldn't get finished in one speech, but they were all applauding him.
Yes,
I wish we had you.
Yeah. And the same when it was Stephen Flynn the week before.
Yeah.
I mean, he was getting applause. He's going, well, no one's talking about Brexit. Immediately applause from the audience. So
there you go. A bit windy up on Bannockburn, but I think
it's a bit windy. But it's quite a spectrum of views, isn't it? And ideas and ways of looking at it. Obviously, some people thinking, the message from the SNP is getting through, and then other people who have clearly stepped away from the SNP.
I thought your point was excellent, though, when you were agreeing with the guy with his point that Scots are sovereign, but then when he said, and therefore the SNP should have done something, you were sort of, but if we're sovereign, why are you leaving it to a political party to do? And I thought, that actually is likely to be, I think, once we get over this election, that whole constitutional convention and let the movement and let civic society take over, because there is only so far the politicians can take you. They can't lead us where the population doesn't want to go.
That's right. Yeah. I enjoyed talking to that chap, and then the lady with the Salvo T-shirt actually as well. I quite enjoyed talking to both of them, really. And we were both saying to folk in that when we were chatting to them, we're not disagreeing with Scots being sovereign. I'm not so sure it's quite such a unique thing as Salvo would have us think. However, leaving that to one side, if you do argue that the Scots are sovereign, you've got to persuade Scots, because Scots may be sovereign, but we're not persuaded about independence. We're still sitting at 50-50, and that's the main job to be tackled, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I enjoyed that day up at Bannockburn. It was
yes, it's always a good one. That we put a little 5-minute clip of the march coming in, as we always do on our YouTube channel, and most of the comments underneath are perfectly nice. But there was somebody who'd put, and I think a little bit disingenuously, had put, is this a celebration of the anniversary of the battle, or is it an independence rally? I'm confused. I thought, it's both. Why is that difficult? And then somebody had nicely put underneath, they've not noticed the irony in that question.
But it was good, actually. I was glad I went along, and that 5-minute video you put up had a lot of people watching it.
I think people like to see themselves. They bothered to turn up. We've got a few other wee things. We've also got an interview coming up with Bill Bonnar, but before we get to that, there's been a bit in the papers, and actually some of the discussions that we've had recently.
The other night, you and I sort of went to this. We were in the Zoom part of this lecture by Professor Sir John Curtis, who was introduced as having been described by an American outlet as the most trusted man in the UK when it comes to elections. I thought that was quite good, really. So it was a lecture being put on by the Stevenson Trust for Citizenship as part of Glasgow University, and it was called Prospect for the 2024 election. I really enjoyed it. If you like graphs and statistics, you'd enjoy that lecture. It'll be on their YouTube channel, and then he's coming back, I think, in July, isn't it, to do
the 11th? Yeah,
tell us what happened. So that'll be interesting.
That'll be really interesting. But what caught my eye is there was a whole load of information, but one thing that I particularly homed in on was that he said this is probably going to be the election with the lowest turnout possibly ever, and that is a sign of political disengagement. It's a sign of people not thinking that their vote makes a difference. It's a sign of, well, it could be a sign of anything, can't it? I mean, it could equally be a sign of no, we're perfectly happy with whoever gets in, just you carry on, lads. That's the problem with abstaining, really, is that nobody knows what's in your mind when you make that choice. But it is something that there's been quite a bit of discussion about. There was a big article in the National just a couple of days ago with Max Small from Bella Caledonia, and his whole article came across just as waves of despair, really, with the whole political setup. And then what caught my attention underneath was Peter A. Bell, who is, a very prolific blogger, forthright in his views, yes, had suggested in the comments that there was some merit in, if everybody spoiled their ballot paper saying the same with the same phrase, and the phrase he suggested was "end the union," that somehow that would get attention, it would be newsworthy and what have you. So I was curious about this. So I had a look at first of all, at the Electoral Commission actual guidance as to what do they do with spoiled ballots. Is there some kind of count? Is there some kind of, analysis of what's on them? Is there some kind of reporting of results? So we'll just pull up the information. I've just cut and pasted this from the guidance online of the Electoral Commission. 4 reasons for rejecting a ballot paper. One is that it doesn't have the proper official mark on it in the first place. One is you vote for more than one candidate, that means they reject the ballot paper. if there's anything else written or marked by the voter that can identify the voter. So if you've added your address or you've signed it, or I don't know why anybody would do that, but clearly they do, otherwise it wouldn't be in the rules. Or if it is unmarked or void for uncertainty. Now that is, I suppose, the catch-all, that if you're going to write something like end the union and not actually choose a candidate, that would be the one it would come under. The person who's overseeing the count must decide on the validity of all the doubtful ballot papers. So when they're counting them, they'll put them all to one side, and then in the presence of candidates, anybody else who's entitled to be there at the count, they'll decide of those doubtful ones. And some of them, it might be that they think, well, actually, no, we all agree that's clearly for, they've crossed somebody out and put somebody else in, they'll accept that. If they decide, no, they're still rejected, all they have to do is count them, and they include that in the total number of votes cast. So that's it. There's no collation of what were the statements or obscene pictures or whatever people had used to deface their papers. There's no sort of reporting of it. Now, recording rejected ballot papers, the returning officer, the person who's responsible for the results, draws up a statement showing the number of ballot papers rejected and for what reason. But that means which one of those 4 reasons applies. It's not, and this is what they said, and 12 of them said X. And then if they're rejected, they get marked with the word rejected. And observers can observe this process, but they've got no legal right to object to the rejection. And then they all go into a package of rejected ballot papers and it gets sealed up. So this idea that you're somehow sending some kind of statement or making a message, I don't honestly think you are. I mean, the people at the count, the candidates, are able to look at the reasons. But, you know, it's like, say I decided to spoil my ballot and I wrote a message to one of the candidates, I'm just not convinced by your ballot, end the union. You know, he's not going to go, oh no, Fiona didn't vote for me after all, because he doesn't know. All he knows is, oh no, voter number XXX didn't vote for me. But this is an explanation that I got from somebody who is an actual election agent and therefore has been at many counts. She said, all the ballot papers where there's any degree of dubiety are read to the candidates or agents, and some are clearly spoiled. Others, if all agree, can be awarded to the candidate if it's clear that's what they meant. For example, vote reform, which is then scored out and a cross in Labour. So what they're looking for is what can you count? They're not wasting time looking at what did the ones who don't want to be counted say. So to me, what's the point? You know, what's the point of going all the way to the ballot box and then?
Well, I don't know. I can
get it.
I think, you know, there would be a certain personal satisfaction in doing it when they sort of march in. Here's my card, and then just go right. Fed up with a lot of them, and just write it over. I'm fed up with a lot of you. I mean, you know, I can understand there's a certain kind of satisfaction with that if that's what you want to do. And actually, I think even though I didn't know what you've just told us about what they do, but even now knowing that, you know, I just think maybe that's a better thing to do from the point of view of them, you know, just health of the democracy than just not bothering, just staying at home.
Well, I suppose, yeah.
So if you are going to go out and make a statement or something, or tear it up in front of the people in the polling station, you know, okay, go and do that, but better that than just no bothering. I get a bit despondent about that. I mean, if we're going to be talking to Bill Bonnar in a minute, who's standing in Rutherglen, and if you remember, I mean, in Rutherglen, Labour won it. Now, we give them the due, Labour got their vote out, but they didn't improve their vote. But the SNP people who voted the previous time just didn't turn up. And yeah, okay, there was a particular setup and particular things that happened to the previous SNP MP. So it was very particular. But at the same time, you end up with a Labour MP because they didn't bother to go and vote.
Mm-hmm. One interesting comment that I saw under one of the comment section in the National, somebody had said there should be an option on the ballot paper for none of the above. But well, that would be interesting because that would get counted.
Yeah.
But we don't have that. This is what I've had through the door so far. I have to say it is almost all, although we've got 9 candidates standing, everything has come from either Labour or SNP, and it's going to be a straight fight between those two. Got this, which I'll be disinfecting the letterbox after that one.
Oh gosh.
But nothing from the Greens, nothing from the Lib Dems.
We had loads of stuff from Labour, and we've had a normal sort of amount from SNP, and nothing. We haven't even. Oh, there isn't a reform. Oh no, I think there is a reform candidate with us. There's plenty of others. There's about 6 or 7 altogether. Nothing from the Lib Dems.
Oh, well, but it is difficult for the smaller parties. And one thing that we have continually kind of asked ourselves as we've gone through this process is, why do they bother standing in an election they can't win? But our next guest is going to explain a little bit as to why they do. And it's really quite an eye-opener. It is quite important. So this is Bill Bonnar, who is standing for the Scottish Socialist Party. He's standing in Rutherglen. Thank you so much for joining us. You must be busy. This must be the most frantic 6 weeks that you've had for a long time. So thank you very much for squeezing us in. And because you are representing SSP in Rutherglen.
Yeah.
Right? How's it going?
The campaign's been going really well. Obviously, it's a much shorter campaign. We stood in the same seat during the by-election, which was a longer running campaign. But I think we've been doing well. You have to start off by setting out what your objectives are. Our objective isn't to win the seat. I think we're realistic about that. We're not going to win the seat. Our objection, I think, was to 2 things. One was to bring socialist politics into the campaign, something that is completely lacking, basically. We see ourselves as the socialist wing of the independence movement. So it was also about projecting our vision of independence, building the party, winning recruits, building a presence. And I suppose in terms of those objectives, so far so good. We've been out regularly at the moment just confirming the post office delivery of all our leaflets. Between this seat and another seat we're standing, there's 125,000 leaflets going out. We've hand delivered something like 20,000 leaflets in this seat alone, and are continuing to do that. We've been holding regular stalls, open stalls in Rutherglen Main Street with flags and leaflets, etc. And we've built up quite a presence. I don't see anybody else doing that in this constituency.
The
Labour Party don't do it because they long ago abandoned that type of politics. Tory Party, Liberal Democrats have really no presence. I did see an Alba stall at one point, but in terms of actual people getting out on the streets campaigning, we see very little of that, but we continue to do that. We have regular stalls in Rutherglen Main Street. That's got nothing to do with the election. And the week after the election, we'll still have stalls in Rutherglen Main Street. Because for us, the campaign never stops. This is just an election, but we continue after that because we're not primarily an electoral party. The electoral parties are located in an electoral process. We're a different type of party. We are a campaigning party, basically. It tries to involve itself in different types of struggles, basically. And the elections are just one aspect of a much wider campaign for us.
You see the Scottish Socialist Party flags everywhere, demos and COP26, everywhere you look, you are on the ground. As you were saying that, it just struck me how far we have come when we can say you want to bring socialism into a campaign where the person who's probably going to win is Labour. What does that tell you about the demise of the Labour as a left-wing party? But
Is there any particular reason why you're choosing Rutherglen? I mean, Fiona and I went to Rutherglen, when that by-election campaign was on, and we had a great chat to a couple of guys who were manning a stall in the high street in Rutherglen there. Is it like Rutherglen, you've got a particular...
We have a branch here. It's been active here for 25 years, active here in Cambridge-Lang. We have a long track record of standing in elections, district council elections, Scottish parliamentary elections. I think someone mentioned to me, this is the 7th time I've stood in elections in this area, which is where the grey hair comes from, as you can probably see. So it's not new for us. We've got an active branch here. We've got a lot of really good people here who they're all local people. They live here. We recruited quite a lot of new people during the by-election, so a lot of them now are the ones taking the lead in campaigning, which is great. We recruited lots of young people. Basically, lots of ex-Labour Party members who were in the Labour Party attracted by Jeremy Corbyn, basically. Some joined because of Jeremy Corbyn. Most of them, a lot of them have been driven out the local Labour Party now, and a lot of them are come to us. So it's for that reason we've got a long record of standing here. I have to say, in terms of the by-election, in terms of bodies out, leafleting, canvassing, we probably did as much as any of the major political parties. It was a logical choice for us to stand here.
And on your website, it's so clear and comprehensive what you stand for, and there's further information. I find there's very little that I can disagree with in your manifesto.
I mean, I've been involved in socialist politics since I was 16. I mean, I massively predate the SSP, basically. And when we were formed 25 years ago this year, I was one of the founder members, and it was formed from a number of individuals and groupings who wanted to bring together what we saw were the two main vehicles for socialism in Scotland. One was socialism and the other sovereignty in the form of an independent socialist Scotland, basically. And with the establishment of a Scottish Parliament, which was roughly the same time, we saw an opportunity for doing that. And that's been our position ever since. Like any small political party, there are times where you seem to make a lot of headway. There's other times you don't. Basically, some of the times you're just holding things together, but trying to take initiatives and things like that. That's the nature of socialist politics. There's no magic wand. I mean, I know that from years of experience. Most of the time, what you're doing is just hard work and trying to get the message over. You're facing, of course, an immensely hostile media.
Yes.
And I don't just mean a hostile media, but a hostile political culture where we think our ideas are quite common sense ideas, but they're not common sense ideas to millions of people who aren't exposed to them, basically. To give you one example, after the banking crisis, which went a long way to wrecking the country, I think the banks should have been brought into public ownership. I mean, what happened was the government bailed out a lot of the banks, but what they did was they nationalised the debt of the banks, but left the banks in private ownership. And it was a case for creating, like exists in many countries, a national state bank. Now, I think that's a very logical, common sense idea. And if you talk to people about it, then they go, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. But sometimes that kind of agenda isn't out there. And so a lot of the assumptions about how societies organise and function are highly questionable, but actually are a common currency amongst millions of people. And sometimes you're just facing an uphill battle all the time. And the only way you can do it is to keep plugging away to win people. The end of last year was the 100th anniversary of the death of John McLean. Yes. And we held an event in Rutherglen, actually, a very, very good event in Rutherglen, commemorating John McLean. And people think of John McLean as the anti-war activist and the class struggle person who led strikes, etc. But actually, John McLean was a teacher, and he came from a tradition that believed that the best way to build to create a socialist movement is to create socialists. And so a lot of his time was spent on lecturing and having public meetings. And he had a situation in places like Pollock where on a wet Wednesday night in November, 100 people would congregate in Pollockshaw's town hall to hear a lecture on Marxist economics, because he believed that's how you build, socialism. We're a bit like that. We believe the best way to build socialist movement is to attract people to socialism, as I was when I was a teenager.
We filmed, actually, was the annual memorial lecture that was all about John McLean. I'll put the link in with this. Last time we were in Rutherglen, the thing that struck us was how much apathy there was among the voters. Yeah. I think the turnout at that by-election was not huge, was it? So are you finding the same thing?
We are finding the same thing. The turnout in the by-election was 37%, which for a by-election which was billed as the the most important by-election in Scotland in years was quite staggering in many ways. I think this election will go down in history as an abstention election. The previous record low turnout of a general election was in 2001, which is 59%. I think this election will be lower for a whole variety of reasons. And I think that in many ways will be one of the things that define the outcome, particularly in Scotland. We're finding lots of people are disinterested in it. We're finding there's a lot of hostility to the election, not to us, but generally to politicians and to politics generally. People are cynical about it and angry about it, and they're deeply distrustful of the major parties. They hate the Tories. They're disappointed with the SNP. They are utterly unmotivated by the Labour Party, for I think for very, very good reasons. And the number of people who say, either I'm not voting, or I don't know if I'm going to vote, or I'll vote Labour, but just because I want the Tories out. What we try to do, though, is try to project certain policies, our socialist policies, which we think stand on their own right, but also maybe point a picture of the kind of Scotland we could have if we had independence. To give you an example, one of our policies is, if I was elected, I would only take the wage of an average worker, average skilled worker, which is about £30,000 a year, as opposed to £90,000 for a current MP. And the reason for that is, if you're an MP, you should be a reflection of the people you're representing. You can't do that if you're earning £90,000 a year. We need people who better reflect the people who are representing. Another one which was very popular, we long argued for the bringing public transport back into public ownership, particularly the buses, etc. Yeah. But one of the novel ideas we've been looking at and exploring is this idea of free public transport. What would that cost, basically, and what are the cost benefits of all that? And we've looked around the world at different examples where they've used free public transport and how effective that's been. And we found that in terms of getting people out of cars, getting better for the environment, also as a way of tackling poverty, actually connects to a lot of people. We've also looked at things like the crisis in local government, the underfunding of local government, which affects local communities dramatically. We oppose the council tax because we think it's unfair. Also, it's a very ineffectual way of raising money. And we have a different idea in terms of a service tax, which we think would be fairer and raise more money. So what we find is a lot of our individual policies, people quite connect to in a big way. And at the same time, it paints a picture of how an independent Scotland could be different and could be better. Because at the end of the day, for us, independence can't just be an end in itself. It's got to be a vehicle to produce a different and better Scotland. And unless that's the offer to people, we'll never achieve independence, because if independence simply was the same as what it is now, only we're independent instead of part of the UK, why would you bother supporting that? Why not just stick to the status quo?
Absolutely.
And it's interesting, if you go back to the referendum campaign 2014, I don't know if you can remember this, when that was launched a year before, support for independence was about 25%. And then there was this mass campaign that exploded all over the country, grassroots campaign, which completely overtook the official campaign. And basically what was happening was people were linking the demand for independence to other things. So you want rid of nuclear weapons, vote for independence. You want rid of the monarchy, vote for independence. If you want to produce a more equal society, fairer society, vote for independence. If you want Scotland to be a welcoming place for people who want to come and make Scotland their home, vote for independence. In other words, by linking the demand for independence to radical progressive policies, it drove support for independence upwards. And I think there's a lesson there.
There is. I mean, just as you're explaining that there, vote for independence for these things is quite different to vote for a specific party for these things. And one of the things that Marlene and I have been teasing out as we've been looking across the various manifestos is how much common ground there is between all the independence parties. I mean, you can knock off the bits where they disagree, which tend to be around the edges. The actual core, free public transport appears in most of them. UBI appears in most of them. All those core concepts that are really bound up with what independence can bring is there. So are you looking ahead to Holyrood as the biggie, the one we can actually make some of these changes at, or do you have some kind of plan for the next couple of years for how we're going to get to that point where we can ask the right question, which is, do you want independence, as opposed to who do you want to represent you at a parliament you don't believe in? Well,
in a narrow SSP point of view, we are looking ahead to the Scottish parliamentary elections. British general elections really are a very unfertile ground for small parties. It's very difficult, costs a lot of money. They're Westminster elections. We would tend to focus more on Scottish parliamentary elections and local government elections. But at the same time, I think it's quite, the next Scottish parliamentary election will be quite crucial in terms of taking a strategy for moving the issue of independence forward. Of course, we need to make a demand for another referendum as a legitimate democratic demand. But we also have to recognise that no Westminster government will now sanction a referendum they think they might lose. And they will always find a reason for not having that referendum. So I think that there needs to be almost like a plan B. How to achieve independence at one level is actually quite straightforward. If you look at how other countries have achieved independence, you first of all got to make the case for independence. And I don't mean a detailed breakdown of we're going to do this, and there's a document with 150 pages, but rather a bold vision about how an independent Scotland will be different and better from what we've got at the moment. And you've got to win a clear majority of people with that view. And then secondly, I think pro-independence parties at some point have got, whether it's the next Scottish parliamentary election, I think it will be, have got to make that the central issue of the election, turn it into almost a mini referendum on independence. And with the aim of two things: one, winning an absolute majority in terms of pro-independence in the Scottish Parliament, but winning an absolute majority of votes. Now, if you could do that, you have an unassailable mandate for moving the country forward. It's very difficult for the unionists in this country or for Westminster to block, because if they try and block it, they'll throw the whole place into a political constitutional crisis.
This is just like a bit of a move in a chess game. The more seats they get, the more, the better position they're in to play that chess game. But nevertheless, and actually the real crunch point comes in 2 years' time for Holyrood. And what you've just said is, I think that's spot on. And I also think maybe at that point, or by that point, the various independent supporting parties need to be a bit less antagonistic towards each other and a bit more, okay, let's work together on this. We know fine that after we're independent, we're wanting to do, bit of different things, but let's work together on this. And as you say, make that independence argument, make that the kind of first part of all their platforms. I mean, I'm hoping that some of the personal egos that are involved in it manage to, calm down a bit and let us be a bit more positive.
I suspect that will be the case. And within that, there's no reason why individual parties can't also run their own campaigns for their own particular vision for independence, not in opposition to each other, but as their contribution. Scottish Socialist Party was involved completely in the United Independence campaign and did everything we could to support that. At the same time, we ran a campaign, a socialist case for independence, but we didn't run that in opposition to anybody. That was our contribution to enriching that whole national debate.
That's a very mature way to want a political party to cooperate as far as possible. And acknowledge that there's something that would be done differently. And Labour will have they're going to win, but they'll have a honeymoon period. But then after that honeymoon period, it dissolves and people start kind of seeing exactly what's happening, or more to the point, probably exactly what's not happening. Then at that point, the whole argument for independence can be made sort of anew, but this time saying, well, the Tories, what they were like, and now look what the Labour Party's doing. And at that point, let that kind of, hopefully that momentum would feed into a much, a general argument for independence.
If you look at the current one, the biggest single issue is get rid of the Tories. And the Labour Party are going in with a single policy. If you want to get rid of the Tories, vote us. Labour are going to win the next election. You mentioned a honeymoon period. I don't think there'll be any honeymoon period. I think very quickly Labour support will dissolve into anger and frustration and disappointment, particularly in Scotland. When the next Scottish parliamentary elections come around, I can't think of a worse set of circumstances for Labour to fight a Scottish parliamentary election. They'll be defending that. The two parties, incidentally, that will do well in the Scottish parliamentary election are the SNP and actually probably the Tories on a unionist ticket, basically, because by that time they'll have been in opposition for a couple of years. And that baggage from Westminster. And I think it's got endless opportunities. Because if you think of the Labour Party at the moment, their central message, if you think about it, is we will work to the same agenda as the Tories and we'll carry out more or less the same policies as the Tories. The difference is we'll do it better because they're a bunch of incompetent. Well, we're competent.
Competently doing the wrong thing. Can I ask one more question? Just when you were talking about honeymoons there, has Michael Shanks's honeymoon come to an end yet? Because he won the Rutherglen by-election on what it seems to me were an awful lot of statements which did not turn out to be true. And when he got to Westminster, he voted against some of the things he said he would champion. Is that cutting through it all?
I think the main thing people are asking about Michael Shanks is, where is Michael Shanks?
Interesting.
Don't get me wrong, I've been in politics a long, long time. I've met many people in the Labour Party who are good people, solid. I may have disagreements with them. Even people in the right of the Labour Party I could still respect, basically. Particularly some of the old Labour right-wingers who had, they're fairly solid right-wing social democrats. Michael Shanks is one of the most ineffectual individuals I've ever come across, basically. And I said that at Hustings meetings when he was there. You're one of the most ineffectual political figures I've come across. Somebody with no presence, no real politics, no real basis for anything, who in 2019 left the Labour Party and urged people not to vote Labour because Jeremy Corbyn was the leader, and then he was jet back. And also, in the Rutherglen by-election, there was no mass support for Michael Shanks. Labour vote actually went down, basically.
Yeah, we spotted that, yeah.
Abstention of voters generally, SNP voters. And what actually swung it for him was the collapse of the Tory party vote and the collapse of the Liberal Democrat vote and them switching to Labour.
That's right, and then the SNP vote just didn't turn out.
Let's hope that for this one then, you get a big swing from potential Labour voters into Labour voters who actually would like a bit of socialism in their Labour. And that could actually, if you take votes from Labour, that's a good thing, isn't it? That will be
in many ways, a lot of our campaign is aimed at the Labour Party, or aimed at Labour Party members.
It's been really enjoyable sitting chatting to you, Bill, and hopefully we'll have our fingers crossed for whatever the result turns out to be in Rutherglen. And good luck with it. And thanks again for coming in and chatting to us.
Thanks for having me.
I really enjoyed that chat with Bill Bonnar. I've often thought, why do people go and put themselves through all that effort and everything for knowing that, it'll be, I don't know, maybe a couple of thousand votes if you were lucky, and often a lot less than that. But it was just really, really, really good chatting to him. And there's at least two people we'll probably try and talk to after the election to get a sort of post-election view, and maybe approach a few other folk. And see what their response is.
Yes, I think there's probably going to be a lull post-election while we all take in whatever the result is, and then there'll be a degree of analysis and reflection on what's happened, and people will have more time after that. I mean, this week they're obviously frantically doing whatever they're doing. It's the last week of the campaign. But that is it from us for our election specials. Keep sending us poems and responses and cartoons and everything that you started sending. It's wonderful. It's lovely to get that feedback.
It's great.
Thanks for watching. We'll catch you later.
Yeah. Bye.